Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Our topic of today is Hop dead? No, but it needs to quickly evolve to survive. And speaking today, we have our president, Brian Hughes, and I'm Michelle. I'm the business development specialist. I will be helping to moderate this call, so feel free to ask any questions in the QA or in the chat, and I'll interrupt as needed.
All right, well, let's do it then. So, this is a subject that I think is very interesting, and I know the topic is a little bit provocative, but I'm going to dig into that a little bit deeper and make sure that that I kind of explain myself as we go. If you're not familiar with Sologic, we are primarily focused on root cause analysis and also some reliability centered maintenance, especially around the world, FMEA. We do work all over the world. We have a presence everywhere, and we also work in pretty much every industry. I was asked the other day by another software company, where do you primarily focus? And you know what? We're pretty equal opportunity and different industries, but also different disciplines. So pretty much wherever you find the need to solve complex problems, impactful problems, things like that, you're going to find Sologic. And our client list, our logo quilt, if you will, very much represents the diversity of the kinds of companies that we work with, the kinds of problems that we end up solving, and the different places where we find ourselves. And so I think that the primary takeaway from something like this, other than the fact that we're proud of our clients and we work really hard for them, it's just that they come from all over the place. And it's pretty neat, actually. It can be a challenge, but challenge is fun. What's cool about it is being able to see how things work, how things don't, see the commonalities between these groups of people and what's similar, even if they make completely different products, and then also what's unique, and kind of gives us a unique perspective on what it's like to solve problems, to address problems of varying types, and that I think is why this topic is so important. So with a topic like this, talking about human and organizational performance, first off, if you're on the line, you probably know what HOP is, like it's something that you're familiar with. If you're not, human and organizational performance is a field of study that's really come into the forefront over, I'll call it the last 10 years. Maybe a little longer, maybe the concepts have been out there. People have been talking about them for longer than that, but over the last 10 years, we've really seen the popularity pick up. And it's in my world, so root cause analysis, reliability, human organizational performance, human factors, all that sort of thing, human error, reliability engineering, a lot of that stuff is kind of in our general, I don't know, maybe not in our fence line per se, but certainly in our neck of the woods. And so first thing is that you see the popularity of HOP and human organizational performance and see it rise. Is it dead or is it dying? Well, maybe, in its current form. And so that's why the title was there. Honestly, it was what I've been a student of this for a while, primarily because, to be honest, I felt like companies like Sologic and people like me that are in the world of root cause analysis have been in the crosshairs of HOP proponents for a long time. Like you don't hear a lot of HOP people saying a kind word about root cause analysis. And to be honest, you can take that a couple of different ways. I've seen my colleagues and my comrades in this world of RCA. Some of them react in a very strong way to that, and I'm not going to judge that. I'm not going to say that that reaction is right or wrong. It's theirs, and they're entitled to their reaction. I chose early on, rather than to sort of be defensive about it and feel like I was being attacked, to treat it more like a learning opportunity, like to look beyond the rhetoric, to look at at what was being said, why it was popular, what's good about it, and what we could learn from it. And over the years, I've made myself Well, I say I make myself, but I actually really enjoy it. Like next week, I'm going to a conference called Community of Human and Organizational Performance, and some of you may well be at that conference in Columbus, Ohio. If you have not been to that conference before, it might be a little late for you to get out there next week, but next year you should go. And this is where I've primarily been exposed to and developed really close relationships with a lot of folks in the hop community. I like these people. I like them. I like them by and large, and sometimes I find the rhetoric to be, I guess, unnecessarily abrasive and sometimes a little confrontational for confrontation's sake. That said, there's not a single person in this community I can't say that I don't like or that I don't respect or that I haven't learned something from, you know. So I'm sure the feeling is, well, I don't know, but I like to think that the feeling is mutual anyway. So good group of folks. Now, but the hop dead thing, you know, as we put ourselves out there into the world and develop these relationships, we meet people. I meet people that are leading voices in the world of safety. And these are people that they're a lot more popular than me, that's for sure. You know, they get a lot of attention on LinkedIn. They're invited to be keynote speakers at big conferences. People fly them all over the world, right? So these are folks whose voices are heard and whose word and writings and whatever else, whatever the other content that they produce, it has weight and people listen to them. And a lot of them are distancing themselves from the concept of hop. They are not doing this publicly. And I'm not speaking on their behalf, and I'm not going to name their names because that's up to them to say those things. But when we have these private conversations, they'll say things like, "Oh, I don't really do hop." It's like, what? Are you kidding me? You're known for that, for the new view of safety or safety two over safety one and or whatever it happens to be. Literally known for it. But then I see themselves sort of pushing a little bit back from the table or standing aside. And so it makes me think, well, what's going on here? And so that's what this topic is all about. I know that's a little long-winded to get into it, but I felt like I needed a little bit of a preamble to say, well, why am I doing this? Because what I am not doing is attacking human and organizational performance in some kind of defensive tit for tat. I know that they have a lot of critiques of root cause analysis, and I even agree with a lot of those. And I feel like I have an obligation to listen first, to hold any kind of defensive feelings I might have at bay, and listen to what the truth is there. And I have learned a ton. And so I'm going to talk about that. I'm also going to talk about the evolution of hop. I'm going to talk also about where I feel it is lacking, all right, where I feel like we could shore it up a little bit because, like anything, it's not perfect, and it's an ever evolving sort of a subject. Okay, so that's I think enough. And as I dig into this a little further, what we're going to do is I hopefully it'll become clear kind of what I see as what's happening, and then also where I see Sologic's place in this, and then what I think is coming next. Okay, so what hop gets right? Let's start out with that part of it because I am a hop fan more than I'm not. I love these principles, and I'm going to give Mr. Todd Conklin credit for putting these principles together, mostly because he's the one that did it, right? Error is normal. The concept is so fundamental to being human. And there is a broad, I guess, background or area of study around human error. A lot of like B.F. Skinner, James Reason, and a lot of other people have laid the groundwork for how we see error. Error being normal. Error is being an attribute of being a human being, a fundamental attribute of being a person. My dog makes no mistakes, but I make mistakes all day long. And you could even say that without making mistakes, that humans can't progress because it's how we learn. We try, we fail, we learn, we try, we succeed, right? That sort of thing. So error being normal saying it out loud, saying it in plain language, and then learning to live it and then to use it in the world of structured problem solving is fundamental. Blame fixes nothing. Now, I have some friends in this world that they're like, no, 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 that's BS. Blame sometimes does fix things, but it is where the learning stops, right? So it doesn't mean that that people haven't earned themselves some kind of punitive action as a result of their choices. They do sometimes. I actually firmly believe that part of accountability is punishment. There are some things by which you should be punished if you take part in those things because whatever, F you. But when we apply blame to a work environment for an honest error or something like that, I think that's grossly overused. And as a tool itself, what it does is it causes people to factionalize, people to shut down, people to protect, and learning generally stops when blaming and punishing begins. So while the blame fixes nothing is an absolute statement, that's probably not completely true in and of itself. Blame doesn't fix a lot of things that we use it for. I think that's probably a more accurate, if more awkward way of stating it. Context drives behavior. Context meaning, where am I? What's around me? What's impacting me? That is going to dictate how I interact with my environment, or another way of saying my behavior in any given environment. I'm going to assess my context. I'm going to base it on all the patterns and things that I've learned over the years. And I'm going to then behave in a way that's consistent with the way that I process my contextual understanding. And what it's important for somebody like us, somebody like me in the world of organizational learning, is recognizing that trying to control behaviors themselves can be a little wily, like trying to wrestle with a big slippery fish in a small boat. But the context itself, if you control the context in which the behaviors are taking place, well, you can actually find that you have a lot of control over the way in which people behave, the choices that they make. So focusing on context is very important, both for understanding the whys and the hows that people do things, and also controlling the way in which, they do things in the future, which is maybe more in line with what you were hoping for. Learning being mandatory. We have to learn. We have to try things. We have to fail at them. We have to learn from them. And we have to hope that they don't kill us in the process. But learning has to be the fundamental goal of failure. And it has to be a fundamental response to failure. And so that kind of ties into how leaders respond and why that is so important. People screw up. What do you do as a leader? How do you behave as a leader? How do you treat that mistake? Is that a learning opportunity and that you drive for learning? Is that a way for us to, is it a window into a gap, a window into a vulnerability, right? Well, if those are the ways in which I'm responding, then I'm going to find partners in learning versus people that are throwing up barriers to learning. I'm going to find people that know that I respect their journey, I respect their efforts, and I also don't expect them to be perfect. In fact, I expect them not to be. And then at the end of the day, my response to focus on learning so that we can drive better context. And when I don't blame them for every last little thing, because most of the time when they commit errors, it's because it's just a normal part of being a person. All of this is extremely important. Did Todd Conklin make all of this up? No. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he'll tell me that he did. No, he wouldn't. He But what Todd, and I want to give some real props to Todd Conklin for his ability to synthesize these things in a way that has all of us talking about them. Right. So even if he wasn't the originator of some of these concepts, and I know he wasn't, and he does too, but he is a fantastic communicator of these concepts. And so, if Todd deserves, in my opinion, credit for one thing over all else, it is in his ability to craft a message that stretched a lot further than the nuclear nerds that, nerd club that he was a part of in the 90s and in the early 2000s that are basically just sitting around with their pocket protectors, kind of having these in-depth discussions about how people interact and how we could do a better job, especially when you're dealing with highly critical situations. Okay. Todd took this he spoke it in a way that really made sense and gave it room. And Hop gets that right. And I like these principles and I find them extremely useful. It was a necessary shift, and it provided a more human-centered language that a lot of people can relate to. RCA could only wish to have a spokesperson who was able to articulate its value the way that Mr. Todd Conklin articulated the value of human and organizational performance. That respect for context, man, that's just such an important part of really understanding problems because problems come out of normal work. And normal work, understanding the way in which things normally occur, not so much focusing 100% on the event, okay? The truth is that adverse events are not predictable. Not very likely. There are no statistical models that tell you where your next event is coming from. But all of them are born from the contextual normal work that people are doing, okay? Or whatever the activity is that you're doing. I was out on my road bike yesterday. I've been riding a ton lately, and that puts me into some interesting contexts. All right. Road bike plus cars, road bike plus gravity, road bike plus weird roads and distracted people and pedestrians and all that sort of thing. Well, what about the workers? Workers that are out there in your factories, workers in your fulfillment center, workers that are processing chemicals. Normal work is what they're doing and get right most of the time. And errors are spawned by normal work. And we need to understand what normal normally looks like so that we can understand the risks that they are successfully managing most of the time, the vast majority of the time. And then also escaping from blame, moving beyond the blame, moving beyond the, pointing the finger. Tragic event with India Air, Boeing 787, with the plane crash that happened just yesterday. And you know what? There's going to be a lot of finger pointing. It's already probably started. Was it this person? Was it that person? Was it the pilot? Was it Boeing? Was it India? I don't know. But there's this need to place blame that seems to be hard coded into humanity at this point in time. And this is a necessary shift for us to move beyond that. And also the opportunity to have better conversations. And I know, and this is going to be politically controversial, but the word diversity has a negative connotation in some circles these days, but not for me, not at all. In fact, being able to communicate with people that see the world differently than I do helps me solve problems more completely. And that's not political, that's just reality. It's quite a lot of hubris to believe that I, Brian, see the world in a complete and omniscient fashion. No, I don't. I recognize that I have blind spots all over the place. I need people that can see the world differently than me, that have different experiences, and that are going to see the world in a way that I'm not seeing it because the events that we're working on aren't simple. They're complex. And if I'm going to try to understand a complex event, I better have a complex information processing system that's going to help do that job. And it's bigger than one brain. That's the point. And so diversity for me allows us, especially in the context of human and organizational performance principles, then that allows us to have better conversations, which facilitate better learning. We need the fertile soil. And that's what HOP principles enable. But they're not enough on their own. Okay, and so remember I said earlier, as much respect as I have for hop principles, as much as I've learned from my hop friends out there in the world and what I've read and what I've experienced, presentations, direct conversations, more than a couple of beers, that sort of thing. It's not enough in and of itself. And you can see that in the way that it's implemented too. So we need the fertile soil for learning to occur, but we need more than that. We need facilitation and guidance, okay? We need structure and process, and we need the ability to scale and share. Now, my hop friends will not disagree with me on the facilitation and guidance. I know that they feel this as well. Now, we're going to go sideways a little bit on structure and process because I know that they feel, and I've got a slide coming up to talk about this. A lot of them feel like structure gets in the way of learning. I couldn't disagree with that more. They're not right about that, and that's based on my own individual experience. It is also going to be based on me observing them and how they fall down when they're doing their thing, and then also the ability to scale and to share. And I think that they would agree with me on this, although it doesn't really overtly call that out. And I think it's important. It's really important to distinguish between a process versus a set of principles. Hop is not a process. Hop is not a series of steps that you go through in order to get something done. Okay, there's not step one of hop. No, it's not that. It's not this is what you do first, what you do second, and what you do third. Okay, so but the process itself, having process along with that fertile substrate is extremely important. Let's talk about structure for a minute. So the analogy that I often use has to do with the human skeleton. Um, I bought a scale the other day. We talk about that later, but it's actually been useful. I normally avoid scales. I don't know why, but I just do. But this is kind of a neat one. It's smart. And it'll tell me how much my skeleton weighs. How does it know that? I don't know. I mean, come on. I guess you'd have to strip the bones clean, and if it was off by, I don't know, 10%, I think I'd still be okay with it, right? But normally the human skeleton weighs only about 15 pounds. But can you imagine what a human body would look like with no skeleton? No. I mean, that would be pretty ugly. A big pile of goo, sort of shuddering, trying to talk or whatever it was doing. It just wouldn't work, right? But so it's not much. It's not much in the scale of mass to whatever else you're carrying around with you, but it's important. And the absence of a structure creates a barrier to learning. I 100% agree with this, and I'll fight you over it. I think that we need a little bit of structure. But now, so let's get on the other side of it and look at what my human organization performance friends would say. Oh, that structure that gets in the way. That's, you end up forcing your people in your team to like fit the structure, and then you holding them to your structure gets in the way of them learning about the problem. Okay, they're right about that part of it. I caught myself doing it in my first FMEA or failure modes effects analysis. I've probably been doing it in root cause analysis too, but I've been doing that for a lot longer. I feel, like that's like sort of second nature to me. But when I started doing FMEA, it was not. And I was getting really frustrated, not because my team wasn't behaving properly, but because I couldn't seem to hold them to the structure. I was like, look, we're filling out this line right now, but you guys are talking about this, that, and the other thing. Well, you need to shut up. Otherwise, I'm not going to get done with the spreadsheet. We're not going to get done with the spreadsheet. And then I realized my mistake, and you could probably see it too. I was like, the problem is I've got to fill out all these lines on the spreadsheet. And if you mofos don't do what I say when I say it, I'm not going to get done. And that was structure. I was like, whoa, you really got that backwards, man. You you really got that backwards. My job is to facilitate learning. And my job later is to organize that learning. Yes, I get paid to fill out the spreadsheet. And yeah, I got to do all that. And there's a process there that's important. And sometimes they get sidetracked. And sometimes they're talking about stuff that doesn't matter, and they're off in whatever land. And then that's when what I learned, here's what I learned. I'll just kind of get to the meat of it. Structure is something that you attenuate. You dial it up if you need to dial it up. You dial it back if you need to dial it back. You put the learning first, and sometimes learning requires structure. And sometimes learning requires getting the F out of the way, right? So you just stand back and let the fire burn. Now, and I think, and don't get me wrong here, I want to make sure that I'm not painting with the broad brush. And I'm going to use my buddy Andrea Baker as my sounding board. She's not here. I can't ask her, but I don't think she would disagree because she and I had this exact conversation. Um, the facilitator needs to be who the facilitator needs to be in any point in time. And so that means that you as a facilitator, you need to be listening, playing heads up, find like, are we learning? Are we progressing? And what do I need to do in this moment to be the leader that this team needs me to be right here, right now? That's a lot more seat of the pants than a lot of people are comfortable with. But if I know that I've got a structure, such as Sologic root cause analysis, got 5 steps. What are we doing right now? Are we talking causes and solutions when we should be talking about evidence? All right, well, then let's focus on evidence first. Hey, are we jumping to what the boss is going to say about this solution before we're even done brainstorming? Hey, let's back that up a little bit. You guys were getting ahead of the process here. Or do I just need to allow folks to talk for a few minutes? Well, I'm going to make that call in a moment. Andrea's going to do it too. She doesn't use Sologic root cause analysis, but she still gets the job done. But she gets fundamentally that sometimes you got to dial it up and sometimes you got to dial it back. The absence of structure creates a barrier to learning, and human and organizational performance people, if you're going to be good at it, you're going to realize that and you're going to learn that you need to overcome that, or you're just not going to be very good at it. And that's just the reality of the deal. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is the output for learning teams. Okay, so first off, there's not really a prescribed output, but I have seen flip charts, sticky notes, dry erase boards. I don't know, like there's not really a right way to capture the information as long as you get it written down. But let's go with sticky notes and flip charts. It's visceral, it's visual, and people like it because you're hands-on, and you're standing, and I like it for those reasons too. And I'm not above building a cause and effect diagram using sticky notes. All right. In fact, I'm going to use whatever I want, whatever I feel like I need at that point in time to get the job done. However, while it's nice to be free and creative and people do warm up to analog, the reality is that documenting learning team output is a ton of work. So one of my favorite learning team proponents and somebody that I think is very good at it, and also, quite frankly, somebody who's very good at Sologic RCA, what she does is she takes pictures of all the flip charts, then goes back to her desk and sits for a long time, zooming in and rewriting and documenting, categorizing, and just doing a ton of organization. Now, am I criticizing that? No. But I don't understand why you wouldn't document the causes, the effects, the combinations of those things as you go. Very first time that I ever attended a learning team workshop, all I could think about was how much I wanted to use a cause and effect diagram to document and to organize all the things that we were learning. And it all was going to fit just fine in there. So listen, there's a time and a place where the structure gets in the way, and I understand that. That said, when you're using a process like a cause and effect logic diagram to both organize what people are sharing and then also to help you figure out what's coming next, just that amount of structure alone, it doesn't get in the way of the hot principles at all. It actually is extremely helpful because it keeps things on track and it keeps things in place and it keeps you without having to do a whole bunch of ugly cleanup work once the job's done. So, and it also makes sure that you capture what was said more directly and what it links to as you go. and our memories aren't perfect. And so having that structure, I think, is extremely important. Also, okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the fact that some companies have gone all in with human and organizational performance, and I think that's great. Don't get me wrong, but it also kind of reminds me of Six Sigma. They get these big budgets. To be honest, way more budget than what we get in the world of root cause analysis or ever I've gotten. And am I jealous a little bit? Absolutely. I want people to shower us with resources because I think that they should. And so, cheers to the Hop folks that have made the argument successfully to turn on the big corporate spigot, right? Like they just money flowing their way. Here's the thing though. You can make that big splash, and then because of some of these gaps, you get a limit effectiveness. And so the problem that I see here, and oh man, I was in that whole Six Sigma thing, and we used to do a ton of work with General Electric, with Raytheon, with Honeywell, always, and with others, but those are big companies that were all in on the Six Sigma thing. And we were incorporated in as part of the analyze phase of that DMAIC process, right? So when you're looking for special cause, and when you're looking for those things that are statistical outliers and trying to explain those, root cause analysis fit really nicely in all of that stuff. But then you're not really seeing a lot of people doing Six Sigma anymore. And I don't think that's because it was not valuable. I think that the problem there was so much all in to the Six Sigma concept and not really enough sort of zooming back out and saying, practically speaking, is it working? And I see human and organizational performance programs going down this same pathway, potentially at risk in the same ways. And I feel like without some evolution, without some critical sort of self-reflection and willingness to incorporate and to grow and to learn and maybe put some of those principles to work, that you'll see human and organizational performance go the way of Six Sigma. Okay, so
We
um,
have two comments.
yeah, let's hear it.
Larry remarked that Six Sigma expects perfection, it will always fail. And
Yeah.
on the previous slide, Sarah mentioned you are supposed to have a scribe who takes all the notes in the learning team. That's what I do.
Yeah, it's okay. So Six Sigma expecting perfection. Yeah, dude. So that's right. Then that's oh, we could we could I wanted to use Six Sigma kind of as as a proxy, and it's going to be different for sure than Hop and all of that. It was more about the arc of its existence in corporate America and some parallels that I see there. And I'm going to see you next week, Larry, so we can pick this up later. And then Sarah, I don't know if I'm going to see Sarah next week or not, but Sarah, you make a really important point. You're supposed to have a scribe who takes all the notes in the learning team. And if you have the luxury of a scribe, then that's fantastic. I hardly ever do. We're in a different scene though. Like we're hired as consultants to come in, and often there's budget for one, but not for two. And if I can enlist somebody from the client, then that's fantastic. But then the scribe, yeah, they should take all the notes and do all of that so that you can be caught up later. But then at the same time, I would still say that having all the notes in one place is great. And some of the AI the GPT AI large language model tools that are available can really help with the organization. And I've had success doing that as well. All I'm saying is that the idea of building things in a charting if you're charting the relationships as you go, kind of like building an outline as you go. And it's been my experience that that's been extraordinarily helpful. So thank you guys for your comments. Great. So operationalizing things is hard. And so this is where I'm going to show a lot of sympathy. I'm a big fan of people of leaders taking big action because frankly, I feel like I've beaten my head against the wall hundreds of times and had some success, but not enough. I feel like leaders that when a leader does say, you know what, we're going to throw some weight behind this. That's a real neat opportunity, and it doesn't happen every day. Okay, so I've learned to recognize how important those opportunities are, and then to do whatever we can to try to make them successful. Operationalizing things is difficult. It's not easy. The pitch sounds great, but employees sniff out, oh, new flavor of the month. And that's not just related to Hop, that can be us as well. We're just kicking off a brand new program for a client. It's big. I'm so excited to get rolling on this. I'm so like cautiously terrified that we're going to be perceived as, oh, this is what we're doing this year. Oh yeah, they're throwing a bunch of money at this, but give it 18 months and we'll never hear of it again. And I think that we need to be really careful of that. These people listening to employee, one of the questions that I have learned to ask up front, and I just say it outright to leaders. And it's not that I want to, I don't want to sour the mood at the beginning of a fresh, spanking clean program, but I ask, how have past programs failed? Especially if they're changing from a different RCA method to Sologic. I ask them, well, why did that process not work? And what I'm really asking is, was it them or was it you? And to be honest, as much as I like to differentiate from my competitors and think that, oh, Sologic is the greatest thing ever, I love it. I know that that's that's not entirely true, but you know what I mean.
And
I
Larry also shares that, in my opinion, key point for success in connecting people to RCA is sharing what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
Sometimes the complexity can overshadow the goal.
absolutely true. And that's true with these other programs as well. But you have to ask why what caused it to fail. And you have to know that a lot of times it is the execution at the client side. Okay. And I'm not trying to blame the client for that. It's just that if we had control over every aspect of it, we don't. And so we need to be very careful of this sort of thing. But being honest, and so here, Larry, I think hopefully I can add on to your point a little bit here with this last bullet. We've got to be honest. Listen, you know what? This is a good process. This is a good tool set. Hop, RCA, combination, whatever it happens to be. Um, but we need to truly understand what your problems are. We need to dig into what you see as being success, what success will look like. We have to be willing to listen, listen closely, adapt, configure. We need to not get precious about our processes. And many can't or won't do this. And absolutely, this is true from what I've seen in the hop community. Those people that are stepping that are defining their own pathway, they recognize that they've got to not put themselves in a box. But I'm not seeing that from a lot of others, and I think that is not only, I guess, a risk for them as either sole consultants or larger companies, but also to the whole concept that it could sour the entire hop experience, depending on how that goes. Yeah, we tried that; it didn't work. All right, well, so when you talk, this is a little behind the scenes stuff, but when you really talk to folks that have made major investments in human organizational performance programs. This is not everybody, okay? It's not. But it's some of the big companies that you've heard of that are associated with this. You find that they're selling proactive learning teams that, hey, we're not waiting for an event. We're getting people together and learning about a process, and we're learning about normal work. And there's no event, so there's no blame. There's not really, when we have these open and honest conversations, we find where the risks are that they're managing. We find where the risks exist in normal work that we're expecting them to do perfectly every time and that they mostly do. And in doing that, We are basically understanding where the accidents could happen before they do, and hence the title of Mr. Conklin's book, Pre-Accident Investigations. We need to be investigating ahead of the curve, and that is a powerful concept. And I completely agree with it. And I love it. And I would apply root cause analysis in a proactive pre-accident investigation. And in a lot of ways, that's what we do when we're doing FMEA in the world of reliability, is a failure investigation, so to speak. And I think it's extremely valuable. And most people are not doing that at all. In fact, as they're standing up these programs, they're having a hard time even doing reactive learning teams. There's nothing wrong with it, but a reactive learning team I think is great. But a reactive learning team is a little counter to what the sales pitch was, which is if we do this right, we're not going to have problems. We're not going to have events. So, okay, I get it. In reality, it's hard to get people to invest in proactivity. It's actually hard too, if I were to adjust this bullet point. It's just hard to get on the front edge of the curve. But in part, here's the reality of it is this. There are too many problems. There are too many problems. I'm thinking of our largest client right now. It's like they have tens of thousands of actionable, investigatable events every year. I'm not kidding. And you know what? They're not investigating those things. That's on a reactive basis. And so, could they get on the front side of that proactively? Sure, theoretically, but that would require pulling those people off of their jobs in order to spend time to invest in a proactive learning event. And they won't do it ever because they're too busy. And they're too busy not only doing what it is that they do, they're even if they spend any time at all, it's going to be on trying to look at what happened in the past. And the reason of bringing that up is not to it's not to necessarily denigrate people that for whom this is aspirational, but also to recognize that it's more difficult. It sounds great in a presentation at a conference, and it's inspiring. And then when you get out there, even those companies that have thrown a lot of money at this and thrown a lot of capital and by capital meaning their own personal capital behind it, they put themselves personally, their personal careers and respect and all of that behind it. They're having a hell of a time operationalizing it. And so I think that promising more than can be delivered can be a real risk to the individual effort at any given company, but also to the movement of hop in general. Okay. So and then learning teams. Here's the thing that I've seen, and this is not, I don't think people are taught this. All right. But I think that in reality, when the rubber meets the road, so to speak, learning teams are faster, easier way of checking the box that we did something. And so I'm not saying that's right because RCAs are like that too. People treat our stuff that way too. The problem itself becomes checking the box that you did the learning event. Hey, did you do that learning event? Yeah. Not what did you learn from that learning event that we can use to make our system better? You know what? When you see that sort of thing happening, it does not mean that human and organizational performance is not useful. It means that the way in which it's being implemented is going to make it not useful, and then it's going to be painted either pretty unfairly in this case with being a failure. And I think that we need to watch for that sort of thing. And I don't see that happening enough in the world of human and organizational performance. There's still a lot of Pollyannic sort of speak and not a lot of real life operational reality, saying that this is a lot harder than it seems. Okay. So, um, just kind of looking down the line here, I'm going to turn the corner here in a minute. But I got a couple more concepts that I want to get out here. The workers. Okay. So I have a story where which I think should be very illuminating. And so I had someone who went through one of our classes years ago. He came up to me at a conference. This was last year, I want to say. And it was like, hey man, I hadn't seen you in a while. What's up? We were eating lunch and it's like, let's grab a bite. And I said, so what's going on? And he's like, hey, we're doing these learning teams now. And I said, yeah, I know. I know. I think that's pretty cool. How's that going for you? He's like, honestly, it's going a little weird. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? He's like, well, we had this incident happen the other day, and they flew somebody up from corporate, and this person comes in, and the first thing they said was, no managers in the room, only workers. It's like, okay, well, the managers, a lot of times they're there and their perspective is important, but I get that. Maybe a manager, maybe their presence is going to overshadow and be heavy, and the workers won't share as much. But it was just like this hard, fast rule, no managers in the room. And then they got all of us in the room, the workers. And then they said, okay, here's the rule. We cannot talk about the incident. I was like, they said that? Like that? He's like, yes, it was very much. We are not going to talk about the incident. All I want to do is talk about what normal work looks like. And he said, well, what about the injury? What about the issue? And the thing is that these workers were expecting and wanted to learn about the incident itself. And basically, what they were being told was, no, we are not going to we're not the incident itself is not interesting to me. The fact that the incident happened is unfortunate, but statistically not really likely, and it's not likely to happen again. What's more important to me, the facilitator, is to learn about how you guys normally do your jobs. Now you can see through this. You can see what they were attempting to do, and they're putting process in front of learning. In my opinion, because they weren't looking at what the workers needed out of what they needed was some kind of understanding. How did this happen? How can this happen to our worker and our comrade? How might this happen to me in the future? What are we going to do to keep this kind of thing from happening again? And they weren't getting that. And the facilitator honestly wasn't getting it either. And so regardless, and the people that are really good at this stuff, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to paint everybody with a broad brush here. People like Andrea Baker, she knows she's on the hook to explain the event. She knows that she's going to have to talk about the causes if she's writing a report. And she will have said all of those things that I just said earlier, that the event itself is not so interesting in the fact that it's more about how the contextual universe spins those kinds of events off, or is possible for those kinds of events to occur. I totally agree with this, but at the same time, you do need to explain the causes of the problem. And you are going to be on the hook to explain those in a way that meets your regulatory requirements, that meets whatever processes and procedures might be written into your company standards. And also because workers want to know, so at the end of the day, we're going to have to give them that. And I think that that HOP practitioners should be really careful of this sort of story, because I do believe that it's more the norm than the outlier. And this is the person leading this. I know this person, and I know where their heart is. And I also know that they're extremely dogmatic about they're going to put process in front of learning. They would never say it that way, but practical application, that's exactly what they're doing. So the fact that they're missing on the learning and also missing on the people, I think that this is more of a facilitation technique, but I think that it's sort of hard baked into a lot of the material that we hear coming out of human and organizational performance. And I think that needs to change. Causal analysis. One of the things you hear about causal analysis is too linear, and that events aren't linear, that they're complex. And that a causal analysis can't capture this complexity, the interrelationship of all of these things, because we're confusing complicated systems with complex systems. The thing is that I kind of think that's not really reality. It has not been my experience anyway. So what I would say is, and the analogy that I use is like a musical score. These notes that you see behind you are linear. The time as the song plays out, It's now there's combinations like right there you've got two notes together, and here you've got two notes together as well. And also you've got your treble clef and your bass clef. So you do have a lot of things happening at once. In a modern causal analysis diagram like we use at Sologic, we have multiple things happening at once also. But so yeah, is it a perfect representation? No. And just like a musical score is not a perfect representation either, what it is a tool that we can use to organize and manage that complexity. Now you're going to leave it up to the conductor and the musicians to make the music sound great, but the notes themselves on the page are a tool that we use, just like documenting things in a cause and effect diagram. So that idea that it's too linear is not true. It is if you're dealing something with like a simple five whys, but we need to drop that concept that using some kind of a charting documentation tool is self-limiting. No way. It is, in fact, it's crucial in my world to make sure that I'm keeping things straight. So I also want to discuss the idea of missing key learning opportunities. The principle of blame solves nothing. I see this often being misinterpreted as I can't ask you questions about why you did what you did and what the rationale was behind it, what the motivation was behind it, and why you thought it was okay, and why you didn't anticipate what the outcome might be. I think that you can ask those questions in a way that sounds accusatory and can be very uncomfortable. Or if you've done a good job at laying the fertile substrate for learning, you can ask those questions in a way that is extremely helpful, that you can gain the trust of the people you're asking those questions of, so that you can dig in and understand, how did this person perceive their context? How did they respond as a result of that perception? Who might respond in a similar way in the future if I don't alter that context? And I feel like it's the fear that if I ask you anything at all about why you did what you did, that you are then going to be perceived, you're going to perceive me as blaming you. And I don't want that. And I don't want Todd Conklin to think that I'm blaming people. So I'm not going to ask anybody any questions about why they did what they did. That to me is shirking your responsibility as a learning facilitator. That also, admittedly, is a difficult situation to navigate, but you got to do it. But too many hop practitioners are out there avoiding these questions altogether because they don't want to be perceived as blaming a person, and they would rather leave that part of the learning opportunity completely blank versus ever be perceived as having asked a why question as to why somebody did what they did. I don't think that's going to lead to success. I think it causes huge blanks in what's learned. And I think that as investigators or learning ambassadors or whatever you call us, I think we're obligated to explore those areas respectfully, not intending to blame, but to learn. And you'll know that you've created a fertile substrate for learning once you get people honestly and openly telling you why they did what they did. And I think that's a key miss. And now let's talk about this one because it's hard to avoid it. The money and the fame. Um, some people in this world of human and organizational performance are after the money and the credit. And I totally get it. They look at Todd Conklin and they see the success that he's had and they want to make a living doing that. I do. I would love it. He's the United Airlines. He's invited to go to that special club. They give him the metal card and everything. He's like the George Clooney where they pick him up in a like limousine and take him planeside and all that stuff. And then, he speaks to huge conferences and it's awesome. He sells books and he makes a great living at it. I'm sure. I haven't seen his bank account, but I don't think he's doing too shabby. And so I totally get that. And we run a business that's Sologic too. And I want to, and I'm not immune. I'm not immune to that having to giving a good presentation and having people like it and all of that stuff, right? But some of these folks are out there building walls and silos in order to force an us versus them choice. And that's what they're doing. And it doesn't mean I don't like them, but I also see exactly what you're doing. And I don't like them doing that because I think that it hurts the entire field. And I'm gonna call them out on it when I see it. And in particular next week, if I see that sort of thing happening, I'm not letting people off the hook anymore. Respectfully, they need to. I think that it's unhelpful. And the other thing is I don't think that, the perception that sharing is losing, or recognizing that what somebody from the safety one group might have said might actually be useful. I feel like we need to smear the lines and not build silos. I don't want to see walls there. What I think is important instead is that we learn to take what's valuable, recognize when it's useful, and use it, and not worry about whether it came from the wrong crowd or is part of the wrong is part of the wrong source of ideas and information. I think that honestly it's bullshit, and I think that it's hurtful. And I don't think that we can afford to leave value on the table when we need value. Okay. The idea that collaboration is capitulation is not helpful. And I will refuse to paint competitors or other folks with the broad general stroke brush, saying that everybody who labels themselves as this, that, or the other thing is full of crap, not worth listening to. I came up that way in the world of root cause analysis. Our competitors used to treat us that way, and frankly, we used to treat them that way. It's just not helpful, and I won't do it. So finally, major players are distancing themselves. Many top tier voices are walking away from labels, not just this label, but labels. There's a lot of fractionation. There's a desire to stay away from the pack or to stand away from the pack. And honestly, the best players are evolving in ways that don't really fit the hop model. And so, and I totally can get this. Like, I feel like Sologic is evolving away from traditional root cause analysis. We still use the term for reasons that I can explain at a different time. Like, we're not running away from it. What we find is that because root cause analysis is such a strong brand, and also it's so much bigger than just the world of safety. I mean, the pond that we swim in is quite a lot larger than just safety, although safety is a big part of it. We're not getting away from it. And the market won't let us get away from it. And we're not running away from it. But what we are doing is redefining what it means. And I think that's a business decision on our part, but that's the way that we are going forward. So the secret, learn first. This has to always be the case. And also listen and try and adapt, right? So learning first. If you're putting learning first, call it whatever you want. If you're putting learning first and you're putting the learning of your teams first and you're doing everything possible to make that happen, you're doing great. If you're listening, trying other things, trying on other stuff. Here, check this out. I love a big, huge parts of Taproot. They're our major competitor. I think that they've built an amazing business over the years. I think that what they do is valuable, and I think that people get value out of it. It's not my preferred method, but it doesn't mean that I haven't learned a ton from those folks and that I don't have respect for them. And I adapt the way I do root cause analysis based on what I've learned from those folks at Taproot. And I hope that they continue to be successful because they bring more people to the overall party. They're big competitor, and I hope I win when I come up against them every single time. But I love the peanut butter cup concept, that you can bring things together that don't normally go together, and they can be great. And also, I'm not going to explain this slide because I am watching the time tick down. I use this a lot. This is a mental model that I use to sort of root where I think human organizational performance does a good job, and that Sologic plus our tool set does a great job. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how I feel like these two things go together, we do have a free ebook on our website. So with that, I'm going to call this one done. So questions, comments, other, yeah, I'm going to write a blog about this. I'm going to post that blog on our website, even though am behind by a couple of blog entries at this point in time, but I am going to. And so if you want to read more about it, you want to share it with other people, you can go find it there. Otherwise, I wish you all the best over the weekend. Hope you have a great weekend. Those people that are going to Community Human Organizational Learning Conference next week, let's do it. I'm down. I'm teaching all day on Monday. I'm earning my turn, so to speak. So I teach in two classes Monday all day, and then I am doing an artificial intelligence presentation some point later in the week. I have no idea when it is, but that's going to be a good time. And whatever it is that you're up to this weekend, I hope you have a great weekend. And right, questions? Anything else?
No
Michelle,
question.
look
No.
at look at the time, Michelle, and give me credit publicly.
Perfectly punctual.
What?
Thank you everyone for joining our webinar.
Okay. Are you gonna click end or am I? All right, buddy. Hey, talk to y'all later.
Bye guys.